Have you checked out our skits channel? Well, if you haven't, you need to check it out. Taryl fixes all skits. And there's your dinner. Pterodactyl here. And today's video is going to be on this here Ariens ST824. And the ST stands for snow thrower. That's what that stands for. 8 horsepower, 24-inch path. And we're going to get it going. And this is what it came in for. Because I wrote it down, because this is what the customer told me. Leaks gas, fuel lines, throttle, primer. So they took the original throttle off and they tried to adapt this other one on here, which is not working at all. So the customer did supply me with the original throttle control because the inner wire was frozen, and he tried that soaking it in transmission fluid trick. This is how I received it. It was in this coffee can, and I stuck it in the vise and tried pulling on it, and it's still frozen. So I'm just going to make a new one, and I'm going to show you how I make a new one. Because we sell this conduit and inner wire at our web store. You can buy it by the foot, or you can buy it in bulk. We sell it in 100-foot lengths of the inner wire, 50-foot lengths of the outer wire. We also have it where it's coated, and we have heavy duty, which is a heavier wire and a heavier conduit. So check that out if you're interested. We sell it in our online store. So I'm going to make a new throttle for it. The primer's missing. I've got a new primer for it. This is the part number, Tacumish part number. And I have the Tacumish primer hose, the OEM, which only comes in bulk, 25 feet under that part number. Or you can use any kind of hose that you may have that's of the same diameter. And then I've got some new fuel line, 1/4-inch fuel line, which is the brakes and scrap them. And here's the part number if you want to buy this in bulk online. We don't sell this. But there's the part number. You can buy a box of this in case you're doing a lot of repairs, grass rats. So he had taken this heat shroud off, which he gave back to us. Now he did say it ran, but when you pour gas in it, he said it leaks out. And the tire's low. Not to air up that tire. So I'm going to air up the tire with my little Ryobi air compressor. And if you don't have one of these, you should get one. It doesn't have to be a Ryobi one. Just about everybody makes one now. But this is the one I've got because I have a few Ryobi tools. I got it set for 13 pounds. And obviously, this thing needs more than just air. It's off the rim. And that ain't gonna work. Now I gotta get out my air tank. Tip it up. Now there's no gas in it because it all ran out. And look what I just found by tipping it forward. The two little screws that hold the the throttle on. Well, I tipped it forward and I hooked up my little portable air compressor and it filled the tire. It's got 13 psi in it now. So by having it on the floor and having weight on it, it was pushing it off the bead. So I didn't need to use my blaster tank. So just by getting the weight off of it and lifting it up in the air like I've got now, I was able to pressurize the tire. Well, let's check and see how much is in the other side. This one's got a tube in it. I could tell. Now there may be some other things wrong with this, but first thing we need to do is get it running. Let's see how much air is in this one. It's saying that's got 10 pounds in it. So we'll just make them 13. I looked to see if there was a rating on here, but I couldn't find any maximum air pressure on the side of the wheel. So to be safe, I just put 13 in it. That's hard enough. Alright, so let me get rid of this. And let's look at this fuel line since we got it flipped up here. Looks like it's all hard as a carp. I'm going to take this tank off. I'll make it a little easier to see what I'm doing. Two bolts, stick them back in here, a couple of threads so we don't lose them, because I'm good for losing stuff. Like I said, this fuel line is pretty hard. It looks like it might have a gash in it there. We're going to have to pull this blower shroud off because there's a little piece of that primer, because that primer threads into this cover. It's got threads on it. And it's snapped off. So I need to get that piece out. Plus, they changed the design of this at some time where they use a different primer. Let me show you the newer style one. The newer style one's like this, where it snaps in. So that one, you can unsnap it from the cover, and the hole is big enough where you can get the primer hose through the cover. But this older style one that threads in, you have to remove this cover to replace that primer hose. And then that'll make it easier for me to change the fuel line too, because I'll be able to see everything. So now I need to go ahead and take this blower shroud off. So I'm going to need a 1/2 inch. I got to take the electric start off. So these little screws are 1/4 inch. And get that out of our way. We got 2 1/2 inch up here. And then our choke over here is latched onto that cover. And that looks like it's a Phillips. I'll get a Phillips for that. And then we got 7/16 down here with this bracket, which has got all these wires for the safety going to it. what I do on my 3/8. Here it is. I need to remove this 3/8 bolt, which I need an extension for now to get down in there. Need a long 3/8 or 1/4 inch drive. Get that out of my way so I can get in here with the 7/16. All right. And then get a Phillips. Just loosen that up just to get that link out of there. Hopefully we got enough room to get this off of here. Yeah. So there's the hose. Still connected to the little piece that it was threaded in there. But of course this end rotted off the carburetor. So now I can thread the new one in. And then I'll add a new piece of primer hose to the back of it. I'll cut it a little bit longer than the old one just to make sure I got enough. And then since I'm in here doing the fuel line, I can access it a little easier. Because in some of my other snowblower videos, I have a trick for replacing this fuel line without pulling the cover. Let me get that clamp off of there. And again, the customer says this does run. But I got a sneaking suspicion that I'm going to end up rebuilding the carburetor on it too. But we'll find out. Because when he said it was leaking gas, usually that's because the needle and seat aren't sealing. And the shutoff valve, look at that, it's frozen. So I'm probably going to have to replace this too. Yeah, this is probably no good. It's all hard as a carp. I don't want to go through all this work and then find out that this valve is leaking. So I'll cut new pieces of hose and I'll put a quick, I got a 90-degree one of these brakes and scrap them. 90-degree shut-off valves. I'll just put one of these in place of this Tecumseh metal one. So let's just take a peek in the carburetor anyway. First thing I notice, there's no washer. There's no sealing washer on the high-speed needle valve here. There's supposed to be a washer on there. That's gone. Looks a little bit of corrosion in there. Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm sure if I would have just did what the customer said, somebody had been in there. You can tell because they were scratching at it. Scratching at it like a rat. Hold it up to the light. Let's see what kind of... Oh yeah, this thing would have never ran. Look at that. The needle is stuck. So again, never listen to the customer. They don't know. That's the thing. If they knew, they wouldn't be at your shop. Yeah, that pin is... That pin is frozen in there. Yeah, this thing hasn't ran in years. Look at that. The needle is just totally stuck in the carburetor. It's totally stuck in there. It's the problem with this snow blowers and generators, rototillers, pieces of equipment that rarely get used. And when they sit for a long time, that fuel just ruins everything. So yeah, this thing needs a lot more than what's just on the list. And again, we haven't even got it running yet. What's going to happen once I get it running? Is it going to need belts? Is it going to need a drive disc? You know, this snowblower is pretty old. And then again, they wonder why the bill is so high. Because it always needs more than what they think it needs. But again, you know, they don't know. I'm not bashing on the customer. They just don't know. That's why they're bringing it to me. So this is going to have to come off. Where we can get it apart. Pay attention to where your links are hooked up. I'm going to unhook them from the governor back here. That one went in the end. And this one went right there next to it. Okay. Alright. Got the carburetor off. Now let's see if we could save it. Try getting this needle valve out. So yeah, I had it running. It run when you spray a little spray in there. But it won't keep running because when you pour gas in it, it just runs out. Yeah, it needs a lot more than that. Yeah, this thing has been pretty neglected for a long time. Alright, I'm going to have to put this in the ultrasonic cleaner. Let me get that low speed needle out of there. I'm going to take all this off. Take all that off. Now if you're unsure, you know, because there's multiple holes in here, and when you're doing one of these, if you're not sure, then scratch it. Put a scratch mark there. or take a picture with your phone so you know where it goes when you go to put it back together. Dig that O-ring and that little thing out of there. So now it's ready to go in ultrasonic cleaner. So while it's cooking in there, I'm going to go ahead and replace the fuel lines. So let me fire up my It goes up to 80 centigrade and it'll only do it 30 minutes at a time. Alright, I'm going to cut the fuel line, and I'll cut it a little bit longer. I can always trim it off. This piece I can cut exactly, and we'll see if we could use these clamps over. See if they're just the right size. Oh yeah. So we'll use these over. All right. So, back behind here, let me get a light, just so you know, because I've seen people do this before when they've tried to change these fuel lines themselves. There's a little tab right here, and it has to go on the other side of that. Otherwise, the flywheel will rub on it. Or if you use too fat a fuel line, like if you've got fuel line that's got a thicker wall on it, if it's fatter, you'll never get it through here. So that's why you got to use the thinner wall stuff. I've seen where a lot of people will just run it. They'll just run it on the outside because they can't get it through here. So they'll run it on the outside of the... But I've seen where the flywheel rubbed on it, and then the gas all pours out. All right, so there we go. Like I said, I made it a little longer. I may have to trim some off. Go ahead and put the gas tank back on. You can always put a little bit of lubricant on there if you're having a hard time. Which is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to spray a little gel lube on there, which we sell in our online store. This stuff is good stuff. Put a couple drops on there. There we go. Now it fit on there a lot better. Wasn't fighting it. And we want to make sure that's going to be away from that gear. But that cover, the blower shroud's got a bump on there, so it's going to hold that away. We got this little bump and the fuel line's going to come through there. So that's going to keep it away from that gear. So you don't have to worry about that. Now I need to add the primer hose. So where was that old piece? Right here. That piece ain't long enough. A couple of loose pieces in the box. So I use this one. Now it's longer, but again, I can trim it off. So I don't want to cut it and then be too short. I'm going to do the same thing just to be safe, because that is plastic. I don't want that to snap off because it was fitting on there a little tight. So I'm going to put a couple drops of that gel lube on there. There, and it slid on there nice and tight. See, and it ain't coming off. You just sprayed that gel lube, now that hose is going to fall off. It ain't falling off. Put this cover back on. You know what? That cover came off a lot easier with that gas tank out of the way. All right, so then I've got it running through this slot here. The fuel line and the primer hose. So since this is a snow thrower and it is, you know, being ran in wet, cold, icy conditions, it's a good idea to put a little never sleaze on the hardware, because look at this. This is all rusty, this bolt. And we also sell this in our online store. So yeah, whenever you're working on equipment that's being used outdoors a lot, always a good idea to sleaze up the hardware. So this tire's got a leak in it somewhere because it was already down to about 4 pounds since we've been filming. So I'm going to see where it's leaking from. It might just be leaking from the bead. If not, I'm probably going to have to put a tube in it. So just take soapy water. This is just a bottle with water and some dish soap in it. And I'm going to spray it around the bead of the tire and see if we get any bubbles. Right here. See, it's leaking pretty good. So it's leaking from the bead. So I'll take the tire off or take the wheel off. I'll break the bead down. I'll put bead sealer on there. And I'll reseal it. Yeah, it's leaking all the way around. Sometimes when they're dry rotted, it'll leak through the dry rot. Then you have no choice but to put a tube in it, because that tire sealant won't work. Tire sealant only works for punctures, like if there was a hole in the tire. It doesn't work on dry rot because it can't get up on the side of the wall to seal it. It's only for sealing punctures because of gravity. That's what that tire sealant works on. So many people try to seal their tires when they're dry rotted, and it doesn't work. So if you want to learn more about fixing tires, check out my tire video. I got a video on tire repair. It shows you all the different methods and stuff for doing that. It's not leaking here. That's just suds. It's just leaking from the bead. Yeah, it's really leaking. Look at it. It's probably all rusty too. So I need to get that fitting off of there. So this is how I do it. Just clamp it in the vise and just pull on the conduit. Let me cut that off the end. Just rip it right out of there. Now, take my drill gauge and we'll see what size this will fit through. 3/16 fits pretty good. So I get a 3/16 drill bit. Because when they put that in there, they crimp it. They put like a center punch mark. So you gotta get that out of there. I don't want to crush it. Oop, I'm already losing it. Come here, little guy. I don't want to distort it. Let's try this other end. Again, you got to be careful. You don't want to crush it. All right. It's in there. Then you take a center punch and you put those divots back in there to hold it from popping out on you. Put a little more pressure on it this time since the conduit's in there. And that'll keep it from coming out. Now I can stick the inner wire back through. Then you got to get yourself one of these. This is called the Z bender, which we sell also in our online store. If you already haven't had one of these or got one of these, you need to get one. Stick it in the hole, bend it over 90 degrees, give it a spin, bend it up, put your Z in there. You may have to trim a little bit off the end. Now I can stick it in the hole. And then now I'll just pop it back in. Turn this vise. Now I want to pop it back into there. And then you're going to want to squeeze that. So it won't come back out on you. There. Now, I'll spray my gel lube on the outside of the cable after I install it, and it'll soak through to lubricate this cable. Or you could buy the plastic coated cable that we sell, which has a plastic liner on the inside. And then that way you've got that plastic sheathing on the outside. Another trick I've done is put heat shrink tubing on the outside after I lubricate it, and then heat it up, and then the heat shrink tubing will put a coating on the outside. But I always like to just spray some lube on there, and it'll soak through the conduit because there's no liner in here, and it'll lubricate that cable. And that gel lube's real sticky, so it'll stick to the cable. I ran it long so I could trim it off, and then I'll bend my new Z on the other end once I figure out. So I'm going to go ahead and install this back on the snow thrower. Well, the rim isn't all rusty, so I wiped it down with a rag. Now I'll put this bead sealer on there, which we get from one of our auto parts stores. Just brush on a lot. And then we'll air it up. And then we'll check it with the soapy water. I need to get some more. I'm almost out. All right, I aired it up. See if we got any more leaks. So far, so good. We check this side. So I may have to do this side too. And we'll check the valve stem. Sometimes if that valve isn't tight, it'll leak through there too. Looks like it's all good. I noticed right there and right here, it's got a very, very minute leak. So I'm going to have to bust this side down and bead seal the other side. And another tip, if you spray water in there to check if that's leaking, make sure you blow the water out of it, that soapy water. Because this being on a snowblower, if that freezes, that'll actually open the valve when it freezes and the air will leak out. Something must have fell on this snowblower at some point because this handlebar is bent down and this chute lever here is bent, and it looks like it had been rubbing on here for quite a while. So let me bend this back. I might have to get some help on that. I'll have to have somebody stand on that while I bend that up. All right, next I'm going to pull that belt cover off. Plus I got to bolt this back now. But I'm going to pull this belt cover off here. Looks like two different size bolts they put in there. 7/16 on this side. And the original 3/8. So this bolt's loose here. This is where you take these two bolts off and take this off, and you could split this in two. Let me see what's going on in here, how the belts look. This auger belt. There's no cracks or splits in it. Again, we don't get a lot of snow like we used to. So I think the last time I used Snowzilla was in 2022, 3 years ago. So we haven't had any measurable amount of snow to where you needed to use a snowblower in the past 3 years. Excuse me. Okay, I'm still waiting for the ultrasonic cleaner to do the carburetor. I cleaned this all up in here. This works. Seems like it's got enough tension on it. I'm going to check the oil. Oil doesn't look too bad. I'll probably change it anyway. I mean, it's a little dark, but you can still see through it. It's full, but we'll change it before we give it back. So I'm going to spray some starting fluid right in the intake hole there and hit this electric start. I got the key on. I figured it would run. You should have did that first. That should have been the first thing you should have did, Taryl. Instead of fixing the tire, fixing the throttle, fixing all that other stuff. What if you would have did all that and it didn't work? I kind of had a feeling it was going to work. It felt like it had compression. It's got electronic ignition on it. I figured it was just a carburetor. Let me check on that carburetor, see if it's done cooking in that ultrasonic cleaner. Ultrasonic. Making carburetor soup. Cleaner. Okay, I got the carburetor out of the ultrasonic cleaner. Now we're going to rebuild it. Here's all the parts I'm going to use to rebuild this carburetor. I'm going to put a new float bowl on it. There's the part number. I'm going to put one of these rebuild kits, which consists of the high-speed adjusting gasket, the bowl gasket, and a needle and seat. I'm going to put a new float in it because these brass floats sometimes will pick up fuel, and the fuel will leak inside will get inside the float, and it'll get heavy, and it'll hold it open, and it'll flood out. I've had this happen many times, and I'm not going to sit there and try to solder the hole or find a hole. For a crummy $10, I'm going to replace the float with a new modern plastic one. I'll tell you a little story. One time we rebuilt a carburetor on a snowblower, and we were waiting for the customer to come and pick it up. And the float was good, because I always shake it to make sure there's no gas in it. So one morning I come into the shop and it smells like gas. And I'm like, uh-oh, something's leaking. I come in the shop, sure enough, big puddle of gas underneath that snowblower. Took it apart. The float had got breached somewhere and was full of gas and was heavy and was holding it open because we just rebuilt the carburetor. So then after that happened, from now on, whenever they come in with a brass float, I replace it with a plastic one. If you want to do it different, that's up to you. And then O-rings. I'm going to replace the O-rings on the low speed needle and the high speed needle. And I buy these in a 10 pack from Rotary. And there's the part number, 145. And then I got this little tool that Takumish used to make. I don't know if you could still find it. There's the part number, 670377. Some guys will use a knitting needle, but what's nice is it's got the little installation tool on the other end. And that's for digging the seat out. Stick that in there and you dig the seat out. Or another method, we used to do this in the shop. Hit it with compressed air and shoot the seat out. And we'd usually shoot it at one of the other guys in the shop. And if you got hit with that thing when it come out of there, it stings. You're going to put somebody's eye out doing that, Taryl. That's horseplay. Stop with the horseplay. So another thing I like to do is make sure that this is clean in here. Even though I put it in the ultrasonic cleaner, I like to spray some Carburetor spray on a Q-tip. And make sure that that's clean in there so the needle don't hang up. And then of course, spray it off real good. And there's another thing you need to know. There is a vent hole right here, right in this area. There is a little tiny vent hole right there. And if that vent hole is plugged, it'll leak because it can't vent. And when it doesn't vent, the gas will bypass the needle and seat and it'll just start running out the end of the carburetor. And you'll be like, I put a new needle and seat in and it's still leaking. I put 5 needle and seats in it and it's still leaking. Yeah, well, this vent hole is plugged. Because we've run into that. Where we replace the needle and seat and well, maybe we got a bad one. Put another one in it, still leaking. It's like, what the heck is going on? And come to find out, something as simple as that. A little vent hole right on the side that gets gummed up. So make sure that's clear. I'll put the seat in it. Come on, little guy. And the seat. It's got a little ridge on there, a little ring. That goes down. The other side, the smooth side, is where the needle goes. Put it in upside down, it's going to leak. This is where the needle goes. Put that on the end. It'll hold it for you. Then again, I like to put a little bit of lube on it. So I like to put a little lubricant around the seat to help it to just get inside there a little easier. And as far as this tool, I don't even know if this tool is still available. I've had this tool probably since the 80s. But I'll give you the part number. Maybe there's somebody on the inner screen on Fleabay or somewhere that's got a bunch of these new old stock and they're selling them. I don't know if they're making them knockoff. I don't know these things because I have one of these and I don't need one. I've got a couple of them. So, since I have it, I don't need it. So I'm not going to look for one. Here's the little clip. Now I'm going to get the float out. And the float comes with a love note. Here we go, love note time. Got a little love note in there. And there's also this little hinge spring. Now what the love note says, important assembly information. This kit has been created to replace the brass float. The new dampening spring included should be installed only if your carburetor was equipped with one. So since this wasn't equipped with one, we do not need to put that hinge spring on there. That hinge spring is usually on 2-stroke or 2-cycle snowblower engines. It's not on the 4-stroke ones. How do I know? How do I know? Because I just told you. That's how you know. All right. When you stick the needle on the tab, the little point on this clip should be facing out. Like so. That's what it tells you in the manual. I don't install it that way. I installed it the other way and it worked. Yeah, it may work, but I'm just telling you the way the manual told us back in the day. You're a hack. You don't know what you're talking about. You're a hack. Yep, I'm a hack. Now, this hinge pin, since I had to drive it out of there, all right, it's fitting. I should have test fit it first, but I hit it with a Scotch-Brite. But it was stuck in there. I had to tap it out to get it out. It was really stuck. There we go. Now, our float level. It could be level or a little bit down. So I don't need to adjust the metal tab that's on there, because there is a metal tab where you can adjust the level. That's how you want it. You want it sloped down a little bit. If you have incorrect float level, I don't care what carburetor you're working on. If you got one that's like this, it may run, but it's going to run out of gas real quick because they can't let the fuel in fast enough. Because we've had people, this thing will only run a couple of minutes and it dies. And then we take the float bowl off and the float's like this. Because the seat had swelled up. That's why the float level got out of whack. Because the seat swelled. And when it swelled, it pushed the float up. Well, that makes sense now that you mentioned that, Taryl. The float bowl, you notice how it's got a little flat spot on it. That lines up with the hinge, like this. Well, I never knew that. I put them on the other way. It still worked. Again, just telling you. This is how they wanted it put together back in the day. Okay. Now, I'm reusing this high-speed needle. It's got a little crust on there. This is something else you want to look for. There's another little hole right here. And it's drilled at an angle. That hole has to be clear. And make sure that this one's clear also. There's nothing wrong with this. There's no reason to replace that. All we need to do is replace the O-ring. Now this is a little corroded. That's probably due to the ethanol in the fuel, because it'll pick up moisture. So I'm just going to take a Scotch-Brite and clean up the tip of it. Put the spring on, put the brass washer on there, and then I got to cut open this new pack of O-rings, because we go through quite a few of these. And put the O-ring on there. Turn it all the way in till it stops. Don't force it. Just turn it till it stops. Then I'm going to open it a half, 1, 1.5. Put the gasket on. May have to fine tune it from there, but that's a good starting point. And then a 7/16 wrench. Tighten her down. Here's the other low-speed needle. Same thing. I'm just going to clean it up. Put the spring on. It's got a little brass washer. That's just to keep the spring from digging into the O-ring when you're turning it. If you lost a little brass washer, you could just put the O-ring on the end. It's no big deal. It's just to keep from damaging the O-ring. Now there is another style carburetor like this. The smaller horsepower that has a little tube. I have a video on it. And the little tube's got to slide up and down in there. So you can't hold it like this and put the screw in, because you'll crush the tube and ruin the carburetor, and you'll have no low-speed circuit. This carburetor, since it's on an 8-horse, it doesn't have that little floating tube in there. And I can tell by the needle. The needle on the other lower horsepower, the 3.5 and 4 horse, the low-speed screw is about that long. But this one doesn't have that, so I don't have to concern myself with which way I hold the carburetor. We're going to turn this in till it stops. We're not going to force it. And we're going to open it 1 turn. All right. Now we're ready for me to reinstall it on the snowblower and put some dinosaur juice in there and
fire it up, fire it up, fire it up.
So I got the throttle hooked up here, and like I said, sometimes you need to trim this back, this Z-bend, because this one was hitting. So you need to check that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bend this out a little bit. To make sure that don't catch on there. There we go. So you may have to tweak it a little bit. So you always want to check that. All right. So I got the carburetor all hooked back up. Got all the fuel lines, primer hose hooked up. Now we're going to tie in the cable. So in this position, in the fast position, the cable is at its shortest. In slow, it's at its longest. So this is slow all the way up here, and this is fast all the way back. So I'm going to put it on fast all the way back, and I'm just going to kind of gauge where I need to cut the end of this. So I'm going to go a little bit past there to give myself a little adjustment. I'm going to hold it all the way back for fast here. And then I got to allow a little bit that we're gonna lose when I go to put the Z-bend in it. So I'm going to cut it right about there. And then now we'll Z-bend it. And that's all the way on fast. I'm pulling it all the way back. I'll tighten this down. And there's our dinner. All right. Now all I got to do is fill it with dinosaur juice. And we'll fire it up, fire it up. Shut up! Gee! That voice, the fire it up guy, is in my head. Okay, we're ready to, you know what. We prime it, choke it. All right, she's running, purring like a kitten. I had to open up the high speed a little bit. That's why I said you set it at 1.5. That's a starting point. And then from there you fine tune it. And then I had to lower the idle. That was the idle screw in there. Now, for those of you that don't know, because you know I can't always think of all this stuff, there's no air filter on a snowblower. And the reason is, it's not running in dirty, dusty conditions. It's throwing snow. So there's no dirt and dust. All they do is put this cover on there, which is called like a heater box. So what that does, when this is on there, is it takes heat off the muffin to let warm air get to the carburetor. So, I mean, it'll run without it, but it'll run better with this on there. And I noticed just when I went to put this on, that the muffin's loose. So So that's something else I have to address. But it does run. The auger was spinning. We don't have any snow to test it on. But I did test the drive. And that's how we test it. By putting the drive on and holding back on it. And trying to stop the tires. Now, if the tires would have stopped, then I would have had to go into the drive system and look at the drive disc to see if that was worn out or if it needed to be adjusted. But as you could tell, it was driving. The only thing is this was sticking here. And I think that's because this probably just needs a little lubrication. So again, trusty gel lube, get some of this stuff. It's real sticky. So it's good because it sticks to everything. So you don't have to worry about the lubrication coming off. So I'll go through and lube all this up because that was sticking a little bit. And I'll put the heater box back on. I'll change the oil. You don't need to see me do all that. But we'll just go around like we normally do. And just make sure everything works. See, it's popping back now. We'll lube up the chute. That's what another thing we always do. We'll spray a bunch of lubricant in there to make sure that that's all going to work and not freeze up when you're out there in the snow. Well, there you have it, grass rats. We fixed another one. So, go to our web store. Maybe check out some of those items that I mentioned in the video. The gel lube, the, what else did I mention? Oh, the Z-bender, the throttle wire. There's other stuff in our web store too that you might want, like this beautiful, nice and warm sweatshirt. This wheelie sweatshirt with me doing a wheelie on it. You might want this to put on your scrawny little body. And as always, grass rats, there's your dinner. Woo! Fixed another one.